James Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As always, it's a great honor to rise and represent the people of Timmins-James Bay, and I'm very, very proud to support my colleague from Winnipeg on this bill to deal with the right of Canadians to access information. And this is not a policy wonk issue. This is about ensuring that government is held accountable to the people, and not in the case of this government where the people are supposed to be somehow accountable to the government with their widespread snooping that we know is going on across the country. The principles of this bill are very straightforward, and in 2014 they almost sound radical in terms of a government that is so obsessively opposed to ensuring that the officers of Parliament have the tools that they need to ensure any levels of compliance in following the laws of this country by this government. So we'll go through what these principles what this bill lays out to give the Information Commissioner the power to order the release of documents, to expand the coverage of this Act to all Crown corporations, offices of Parliament, foundations and organizations that spend taxpayers' money or perform public functions, to subject the exclusion of cabinet confidences. This means government all the time says, oh, you can't see those documents, they belong to our cabinet, to have them reviewed by the Information Commissioner to see whether or not those exclusions are fair, to oblige public officials to create records to document the decisions they make when they decide that they're not going to release documents, to provide a general public interest override for all exceptions so that the public interest is put before the secrecy of government. That the public interest is put before the secrecy of government. And ensure that all exemptions from the disclosure of government information are justified only on the basis of the harm or injury that will result from this disclosure, not simply blanket exemption rules. Yes, Mr. Speaker, in a world where Canada, that was once a world leader in access to information and accountability for citizens, is now behind Russia, Colombia, the gangster state of Honduras and Nigeria in terms of getting access to information to Canadians, that's fallen year after year. These recommendations sound almost radical, very reformist. But these 5 recommendations were the 5 promises made by the Conservative Party in the 2006 election. These were the first 5 promises that were broken by this government. And when you look at this, you can see why they set out, after misrepresenting themselves and telling the Canadian people that they would stand up to end the culture of secrecy in Ottawa, that they set out to break those promises first. Because by excluding information, by creating black holes of documents in the ministerial offices, by continually obstructing the work of the offices of Parliament, this government has been able to create an unprecedented level of obstruction, secrecy, political misinformation, and just plain thuggery. We see that for the officers of Parliament, for the Canadian people need to understand, the officers of Parliament are the referees, the ones to make sure that the government plays by the rules. And yet we see unprecedented attacks to ensuring that the officers of Parliament do not have the ability to challenge whatever the Prime Minister and his thuggish minions decide. That the Parliamentary Budget Officer, Kevin Page, was attacked and undermined. That we see this government even attacking the head of the Supreme Court of Canada. The attack on Mark Mayrand, Elections Canada. The insinuation and the lies that are told about people who protect the interests of the Canadian people. So let's look at what's happened under this government. I will talk about the recent report, just the report released just a few weeks ago by Suzanne Legault on the interference and the breach of law by Conservative staffers and interfering with the quasi-constitutional right of Canadians to get information. Now, this is what Suzanne Legault says in her report about this government. The Access to Information Act is a legal framework that confirms a quasi-constitutional right of citizens to access government information and establishes an objective and nonpartisan process for obtaining that information. The integrity and neutrality of the access system depends on strong leadership from the top. Well, they're obviously not going to get that from this government. Ministers and senior managers must ensure their employees know their responsibilities with regard to access to information and the limitation of their roles. Political and institutional leaders must ensure that their organizations follow the policies and procedures governing access. And what Suzanne Legault found in her report were that political staffers Sebastian Togneri, Mark Toupin, and Gillian Andrews interfered with the rights of Canadians to get information. That the ministerial staff testified that they were aware that they did not have the delegated authority under the Act to interfere with the information. That they also aware that those with delegated authority had made the decision to release documents to the public because it was in the public interest. And despite being aware of these facts, these political staffers of the Conservative Party undermined the law by refusing and overriding the delegated authorities in the civil service to keep the documents suppressed. And according to Commissioner Legault, this was part of a culture of keeping the minister happy. So what we see now, and this is where this gets, Mr. Speaker, into the unaccountable world of this government, is that the Commissioner does not have the legal authority to press fines or to hold these political staffers to account for the possible breaking of the laws of Canada. No, she has to go to the minister and ask the minister to decide whether or not that the minister will hold their own staff to account. So the Information Commissioner has written to the minister saying that these 5 files in which the Commissioner has concluded there was interference, that they be forwarded to the appropriate body. The appropriate body, Mr. Speaker, is the RCMP, because we're talking about crimes committed in a minister's office. And what does the minister respond? Quote, "It would not be a prudent use of the RCMP's limited resources to refer these files to them." So we have a minister daring to speak on behalf of the RCMP about crimes committed in her own office, and she says it's not prudent because the RCMP don't have the time to look into it. That's the notion of accountability in this government. That it's okay for them to break the rules, that it's okay for them to break the laws, and they will choose to speak for the RCMP on whether or not laws have been broken based on political expediency. It would not be prudent, they say. And that the Information Commissioner has to go and ask the people who committed the crimes, who oversaw this in their own office, to see if they will turn it over to the appropriate authorities. Mr. Speaker, this is a far cry from another promise that was made by this Prime Minister to the Canadian people, which he broke, and is probably one of the most cynical statements that has ever been made, where he said in 2006 there's going to be a new code on Parliament Hill. Bend the rules, you will be punished.
Sure.
Break the law, you will be charged. Abuse the public trust, and you will go to prison. He didn't tell us, though, he only meant that if you're a Liberal. If you're a Conservative that breaks the rules, you're going to be promoted. If you're a Conservative that breaks the law, well, you could work right in the Prime Minister's office. You could perhaps be his lawyer, for example, or his chief advisors. If you're a fraudster like Bruce Carson, you could actually get promoted to work in the Prime Minister's office. This is the culture of contempt that they have for the Canadian people. And it comes down to one of their fundamental pillars, which is their ability to retain secrecy. So we see situations now, Mr. Speaker, where the Department of Defense says it's perfectly okay to refuse to allow documents to be released for at least 1,000 days. Or other documents that are simply blacked out, page after page after page blacked out. This is not democratic accountability. This is not in any way meeting the basic tests that are laid out in the laws of Canada. But we see a government that believes it's above the laws of Canada. And we will talk later today about their online snooping, where we find now, in contrary to the laws of this country, that every 27 seconds someone from a government agency picks up the phone and demands information on Canadians, and they get it. And they get it for whatever reason. So, Mr. Speaker, this bill is about whether or not this Conservative government lied to the people of this country in 2006. They made these promises. This was part of their election platform. We're saying stand up for that promise that they made to the people in 2006, or my God, how far they have fallen.
Resuming debate.